Our next speaker is Ronke Ekwensi, Vice President, Chief Data Officer at T-Mobile. She has more than 25 years experience in data and information governance. Before joining T-Mobile, Ronke served in various senior data and information governance capacities with several industry-leading firms, including Prudential, Aetna, Basalta, and Pfizer. Her professional experience includes positions in healthcare, biopharmaceuticals, power, technology, consumer electronics, and management consulting industries. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention that she's a Northeastern alum, receiving her doctorate of Law and Policy from the College of Professional Studies. We're incredibly lucky to welcome her back home to Northeastern. Ronke.
Thank you, Groom, and thank you to the Institute of Experiential AI for having me. I feel like I will be the contrarian corporate person after listening to that panel. We had a very spirited conversation earlier this morning around responsible AI leadership, responsible AI principles, why CEOs should care, and how we define value in corporate. So let me start. This is a little bit about me. Groom had kind of mentioned most of this, so I'll skip through this really quickly. But I wouldn't be true to being an alum without starting with, let's see, is this working? There, without starting with a quiz at a university. So what's the right answer? I think if you picked D, welcome to my reality. Everybody and their mother and their grandmothers have all become experts in AI, thanks to OpenAI, large language models, and GPT. And so the conversations that I tend to have on a daily basis is, why can't you deploy that model in 2 weeks or less? Why should we talk about AI, and why should we be concerned about responsible AI? I love this quote by Sundar because it talks about the profound issue or the profoundness of artificial intelligence for humanity, right? So fire, none of us were here back then, was a huge game changer. Electricity was a huge game changer. AI is a huge game changer. It really is redefining how we interact with each other, how our societies are going to function, and how we are going to redefine, quite frankly, what it means to be human, right? So I told this story, I believe yesterday at dinner. I had a conversation with my son, my older son, over Christmas. And he was immersed in Midjourney. He's a creative. And he was doing a tremendous amount of work with Midjourney. And he said to me, when I was a kid, they told me I needed to know how to do math in my head, because when I grew up, I would not have a calculator available to me. And now there is a calculator everywhere. And in that moment, I thought, it was a big epiphany for me, because in that moment I thought, what is it going to mean to be a human in 50 years from now? Like, who remembers when you were taught how to write cursive? Yeah, thanks. Is cursive a useful skill today? Right, so when we think about AI, we really sort of have to think about it from the perspective of it's redefining what useful skills for humanity is going to look like. And in that, there is a bit of fear, right? And so in that fear, and we've seen some examples, so the fear is not unjustified. We've seen bad actors take advantage of AI in ways in which we don't want them to take advantage of AI. And we're seeing a little bit of the polarization of society based on how models work in social media. So there is fear, but the question for folks like me is, how do we embrace both the positive side of it as well, and then address the potential negative sides? to AI. The reality is AI is everywhere. Like how many of you interacted with AI this morning? Yeah, so I used my favorite map application to get here from the Sheraton. And yes, I can get to some places without map directions, but I don't live in Boston, so I had no idea where this was from my hotel. But what I've noticed in my favorite map application now is that it gives me more choices. Make less turns, avoid this, avoid that. So I use that, and that was my point of interaction with AI this morning. But it's ubiquitous. We don't actually see it. I didn't necessarily process it in my head. I'm interacting with AI, but that's exactly what I was doing. So let's talk a little bit about Responsibly AI. I'm a big language defines our experience person. So we have to have, for us to have a common experience, we have to have a common understanding of what it is we're talking about. And so the good news and the bad news is there is no common definition to responsible AI. But what we do have is we have common thematic elements. And those common thematic elements determine the areas of risk associated with AI. So this, there's a source there, and you can click on the source if you get the slides. But those common thematic elements include things like ethics, fairness, accountability, security, transparency. And the conversation that we were having this morning is, how do you make those practical? And how do you actually apply that in a day-to-day as you're building AI systems, as you're interacting with people, and as you're working with people? So let me dig a little deeper, right? Because those thematic elements inform risks. And here's just a sample of some of the risks associated with AI. We know that the history of humanity is biased. And so if you train a model with backward-facing data, chances are you're going to train that model with some level of bias in it. So, for example, I think there's lots of interesting published articles around hiring algorithms that were trained on historical data. And that same son of mine, when we had this conversation, went on and wrote a very interesting article about bias in Midjourney, because what he did was he put in to Midjourney, give me an image of the most beautiful man in the world and the most beautiful woman in the world. So you guys could probably imagine what came back at him. And as we were having conversations around the images that he was creating, what he did was educated me on creating data that Midjourney could learn from, so it would lessen the bias. Lack of transparency. Algorithms, by their nature, are black boxes. Part of my challenge on a day-to-day basis is having to explain what our models do. With increasing regulation, there's increasing demand for explainability. And with large language models, we're starting to lose the ability to actually explain what a model does. Data privacy, let me talk a little bit about this. Nobody wants to wake up and see your company name in the news because you have mishandled data, or get a litigation that says that you are not adhering to some data protection regulation. So our ability to anonymize data, implement strong cybersecurity, which kind of goes alongside security vulnerabilities. We want to make sure that we are focused on those risks. And the main reason, quite frankly, is that is the fastest way to erode customer trust. And as soon as you erode customer trust, your bottom line gets impacted. So, nobody wants their bottom, at least for publicly traded corporations, we don't want our bottom line eroded. There is a tremendous amount of fear right now around job displacement with AI. I think Osama says we shouldn't fear AI, but what we should be afraid of are the people that have a better understanding of AI. You're not going to lose your job to AI. You'll probably lose your job to somebody who has a really good understanding of AI. And then there are components here around ethical dilemmas. In my industry, It's not very complicated, but there are huge ethical dilemmas in lots of industries that I've worked in. Healthcare, for example, is one of them. Life insurance is another one. How do we use AI to make determinations around who gets what policy, how you price the policy, et cetera. These are areas of ethical dilemmas that companies need to prioritize. So I took a shot as to how one would define responsible AI principles. And it's really about the codification of an organization's values into language that sets guardrails, because you really cannot think about every permeation of risk at every point in time. And since you can't do that, what you have to do is create guardrails that help your organization develop and use AI responsibly, right? So let me move on to the next one. We talked a little bit on the previous panel that everybody jumped on the principles wagon. And what I like about these principles, and these are just examples of principles, responsible AI principles from different companies. These companies have, within language, codified what they believe that they want to do, or how they should develop, how they should use AI for their customers. And you'll see things, you'll see common things like being beneficial to society, creating, or not reinforcing bias. I like this one, which says we strive to design AI systems that empower humans and promote equity, right? Because equity is a big issue within our society. So that's a global pharmaceutical company that has that. Just simply three principles for AI. So let me kind of talk about my day-to-day, right? My role, the way I sort of think about my role of a CDO, is to really focus on extracting value from data. It's very clean, it's very simple, but what does that mean, right? So the challenge and why I need to be concerned about responsible AI is that the easiest way to erode value is by running afoul of one of those risks that were highlighted in the previous slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about 4 ways in which I think about how we manage risk while delivering value. And the first is being really clear as to what you want to do with AI. Because without that lack of clarity, there's lots of opportunity to run afoul. When you think about a well-defined use case, then you get an opportunity to make decisions about model technique. You get an opportunity to make decisions around what data do I need for that specific model? Are there legal compliance and possible ethical areas of consideration? So for example, in marketing, next best action. What data do I need about the individual to be able to truly recommend the next best action, either to that person or to the care agent or to the retail store employee or to somebody else? And understanding that use case in a very narrow slice enables you to be able to do that. Content creation for marketing campaigns. What content should I show to that individual based on who they are, where they live, what they do? How do I have the right data to do that? Fraud detection and prevention. What's the right data to ensure that the 95-year-old woman's bank account is not going to be depleted based on my interaction with an individual over the phone? So really understanding a real clearly defined use case helps with creating or building responsibility principles into the way in which we build and deliver AI. And then the final one around employee productivity. I think this is one that we talk about a lot currently in my day job. I mean, how many people here use Copilot? So I use it a lot, and I found that it's helped increase my productivity significantly. But the discussion and the debate really is, how do we balance the value that we get from increased employee productivity with the costs associated with some of the solutions that are out there in the marketplace? These are conversations that organizations need to have. Okay, so data. We talked a little bit about data in some of the previous discussions. Your AI is only as good as the data that it consumes. And so data management is critical. I've had lots of conversations with executives. It's like, why focus on the data? Can't you just point a large language model at it and it'll just clean everything up? No, not so simple, not that true. So it's important to understand, are there quality issues in the data that I'm using to train my model? And how do I address those quality issues ahead of time? That way I don't have an inadvertent output coming out of my model. Are we using too much data? Having worked in multiple regulated industries, there's some very specific laws around the data that you can use, even if you collect it. You can't use it. So are there regulations that you need to comply with to make sure that you are truly minimizing your data, or you are truly protecting your data through anonymization, encryption, and some of the tools that are necessary or available in the market to build into your models? And then I can't even begin to fathom what 1.7 trillion parameters feels like. But what it does say is that explainability requires that we take complex mathematical models, which are difficult to translate into explanations, and translate them to humans. And the humans that we have to translate them to are not necessarily data scientists, they're not engineers, they're not technical. Some of them are from the legal world. Some of them are just your customer who wants to know why did you do this in this particular instance. So what large language models have done, and what generally keeps me up with LLMs, is there's an obfuscation of explainability that is very concerning personally to me. And so how we think about it and how we address it, it's going to be a challenge. I don't have any answers right now. I'm not sure if anybody in the room has an answer, please raise your hand. I'd love to talk to you after. But this is an area of concern, and an area in which is a challenge for CDOs. And then finally, I'll talk about talent. Huge passion of mine. We can't deliver value without the right talent. And 11 months ago, the job prompt engineer, who had one? Yeah, it's a new job. And it's a new job that's been created by large language models. So what AI transformation is doing is that it's requiring that we have a mix of talents, of people that not only build data infrastructure, data scientists, data ethicists, prompt engineers who understand how large language models function. And that talent is pretty scarce today. Then the second area of talent is rewiring your organization to truly unlock the full benefits of AI. I was having conversations around how we could possibly use large language models in improving the productivity of our care personnel. Some of that is going well, and some of that is translated in people's heads as, what does it mean to my job? And how do you get that individual to then take that recommended next best action that's coming from the AI and apply it. And so there are different ways and methodologies in which we're looking at to rewire the organization. My day now kind of looks, if I'm fully busy all day, I come back to my computer and I ask Copilot to summarize all of my emails for the day and tell me what actions I'm supposed to take based on those emails, because I have not had the opportunity to read them. So now I'm learning how to use it better, but that rewiring of how I work needs to happen in just about every role within our organization. So those 4 areas of being really clear as to how we want to use the AI, the business case, being very clear around explainability and how we explain what the AI is doing, making sure that we're using the right data, and data management being critical, making sure we're not running afoul of any of our regulatory policies around protection, around minimization, making sure that we have good quality data, and finally making sure that we have the talent and the training in the organization to incorporate the AI into the way in which we work, are 4 ways in which we're looking to bring responsible AI principles to life. So with that, questions? Yes.
Hey, thank you so much for that insightful presentation. Question around rewiring the organization. Huge, huge challenge, right? To what extent is your organization, the C-suite, aligned, and how difficult is it to get that alignment?
Yeah, so very much, actually. My biggest AI champion is our CEO. Every 3 weeks, I have to sit before our CEO and give him an update as to how we are driving AI across the organization. So I actually enjoy a privilege that a lot of companies don't have, right? And it's manifested in a way where Mike, his name's Mike, has really spent quite a bit of his time learning about AI and educating our senior leadership team about AI. So it's a benefit as well as a curse, which means the pressure from the C-suite is pretty strong in my day-to-day.
Ronke, thank you so much for that presentation and for presenting to us too in San Francisco at the IBM event. With all I'm seeing here, I'm David Matheson, founder of CDO Club and now the CAIO Summit. I was wondering, do you think there's a need in the C-suite for a chief AI officer? Or a dedicated role, somebody committed to AI?
I think there are various schools of thought. My short answer is yes. The reason why I hesitate is part of the challenges organizations face. It's truly not technology. It's not, data science. It's operating model. And so as long as you have clear lines of demarcation as to what does that role do, how does that role interact with other roles in the organization, and how do those roles that all touch data, because data, quite frankly, is the lifeblood of every organization. It flows through just about everything. So how do those leaders, if you have a chief AI officer and you have a chief data officer and a head of engineering and a whole bunch of those roles, how do they work together as a cohesive team is the greater challenge for lots of organizations. But yeah, I think those are roles that you should have, but it depends on the maturity of the operating model of the company.
Great point.
Hi.
I had that same question 10 years ago with the chief data officer
Yes.
role. People argued they should be a dedicated C-suite role.
Hi, thank you very much. This is great context. My name's Adam Tovum, and I spend a lot of time consulting in organizations that are dealing with a lot of the consumer data that you see. And this next best action is always incredibly important, but it requires a tremendous amount of exhaust,
Yeah.
to train the models. And it has historically, even when it's just protected within one company, it has historically been relatively unprotected. With the rise of a lot of privacy-enhancing technologies, differential privacy, homomorphic encryption, a lot of zero-knowledge systems that could be used at scale, is there an opportunity to not have consumer data sitting around and being used to train these models at that declarative consumer record level? And can you start to rely more on behaviors and insights? The advertising world tries to do more of this so that it doesn't pass around as much consumer data. I'm curious about, from the perspective of a chief data officer, as you start to train these models, can they be trained on these micro cohorts rather than detailed consumer data, and ultimately try and upstream protect a little more privacy? Or did I just go too wonky into something
No,
too
I
far?
mean, so I think the answer for me is it depends on the use case. Because if you can train the models on protected data, but if I'm building a model that is like a fraud model, for example, I mean, there's got to be at least some point in time where I need to have unencrypted information, because I need to know who the customer that is impacted, and I probably, if I'm lucky, I might find out the fraudster, right? So, again, it's not, there's no clean answer. What we do strive to do is to protect as much information as we can. And you notice I started with a clearly defined use case, because a clearly defined use case will guide, do I really need the data that you are telling me you want to use?
We have one question virtually from someone anonymously. It's a law student, and they were curious about knowledge, competencies, skill sets that you would recommend law students think about or acquire, and maybe expanding on that, if you could talk a little bit about how you engage your counsel and think about all of the different forms of data that you touch.
So I have a perspective that says every job, it requires some understanding of AI today, including lawyers. I think in the context of the practice of law, the law used to be one of the last bastions of shutting out AI, not so much anymore. But quite frankly, the law has been using AI for predictive coding for many, many years. What the law is probably now kind of wrestling with is how much of that then gets incorporated into the actual practice of law. So I would say definitely understand how algorithms work. Definitely understand what the issues are related to data, like not just from a regulatory perspective, but from a practical perspective and how it flows through a model development lifecycle, because that is useful to understand in the practice of law.
We have time for
Take one
one
more.
more.
So I was kind of curious about one of the things that you mentioned, which was about the amount of attention that AI is getting in the context of the work that you're doing. And I was wondering about whether, to some extent, that attention comes with buy-in, or buy-in is a separate process when it comes to building something responsible. So, where does, because you mentioned that it's simultaneously a curse as well as a boon to be able to have that conversation on a weekly basis with the C-suite. So I was wondering about, what that attention means.
Yeah, so yes, the attention comes with buy-in. And the attention has benefits in many ways. I once heard somebody say that they believe a budget is a moral document. Show me your budget and I will tell you what is important to you. I have budget, which is a good thing. And from that perspective, I have buy-in. Thank you.